Welcome to the deep dive. So, today we're jumping into, well, it's a really high stakes area, isn't it? This intersection of technology and healthcare.
Absolutely. High risk, high reward. Definitely. It's got huge potential.
Yeah, massive potential, but for the innovators, the people actually building things, it feels like a serious tightrope walk.
It really is. You're balancing creativity, speed, all that tech stuff
Right.
with really strict regulations, patient safety, which is non-negotiable, and, complex ethics.
Exactly. And that's the core challenge, I think. For founders who want to genuinely change health outcomes, the margin for error is just incredibly thin.
That's why we're doing this deep dive today. We want to look at the minimum viable product, the MVP, and really show why this specific disciplined approach is probably the best bet for reducing risk and actually making an impact here.
And the risk is real. I
Yeah.
mean, we looked at some data and it's pretty sobering. Something like what? Up to 90% of digital health startups fail eventually?
Yeah, and around 60% within just the first 5 years. It's brutal.
And a lot of that failure, it seems, comes down to really basic stuff like ignoring how doctors and nurses actually work.
Exactly. Or not getting enough feedback from the right people. You build this amazing piece of tech.
That nobody can realistically use in a busy hospital or clinic.
Precisely. So the MVP, it kind of forces that discipline. In healthcare, think of the MVP as the simplest, most secure, functional version of your product.
Okay.
That genuinely delivers some real value, clinical or maybe administrative, to your first users. And the key is it lets you test things, test your big ideas, learn fast, and change things based on actual real-world feedback, not just guesswork.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit more because the whole MVP idea, the lean startup thing, it works great if you're, I don't know, building a photo sharing app.
So fail fast, pivot, no big deal.
Yeah, fail fast. But you can't really fail fast with someone's health data or in a clinical setting. So how do you make sure minimum viable doesn't become like minimally safe or minimally compliant?
That's the absolute crucial difference, isn't it, between, say, Silicon Valley and the hospital floor. The whole risk calculation is just different.
How so?
Well, if a consumer app fails, you lose some money, maybe some reputation. If a health tech product fails,
Uh-oh.
you could be looking at patient safety incidents, massive data breaches, crippling fines from regulators. The consequences are just way, way higher.
So the MVP in healthcare isn't just about saving development costs then?
No, not primarily. I mean, it helps with that, sure,
Mhm.
but it's more about minimizing the scope of potential failure, focusing your resources, your testing, your compliance efforts on the few things that absolutely must work perfectly from day one.
Things that have to be clinically sound, secure, easy to use.
Exactly. And, it's interesting. The biggest financial killer often isn't the initial build cost. It's the cost of fixing things later, especially fixing compliance issues that weren't baked in from the start.
Ah, okay. So the MVP forces you to tackle that compliance piece early, even if it's just for a small feature set?
Right. It pulls that critical testing right to the front of the process. It is as much a safety and compliance strategy as it is a financial one.
That makes sense. Looking at the risks, the research suggests the MVP helps tackle, what, 4 main categories? Let's start with the most obvious one, the one you just mentioned, financial risk.
Yeah, financial viability is always step one, isn't it?
Yeah.
An MVP directly fights that huge upfront cost of health tech. How? By making you prove there's actually a market need.
Product market fit.
Exactly. Prove that fit before you sink millions into development. You limit your initial spending to just the core features. So if the market tells you you're wrong, or you need to pivot.
You haven't bet the entire farm on the first idea. The sunk costs are lower.
Precisely. And that discipline. Investors love that. Showing real results, real user engagement, even on a small scale with a tight budget. That's way more powerful than a flashy presentation about a giant, untested platform.
Okay, so it de-risks the investment. What's next? You mentioned the big one.
Yeah, the heavy hitter. Regulatory and compliance risk. This is the giant chasm, really, between healthcare tech and almost everything else.
We're talking HIPAA here in the U.S.
HIPAA, GDPR over in Europe, potentially FDA approvals, depending on what the device or software does.
Yeah.
It's a minefield.
And trying to get full certification for a massive, complex platform right out of the gate sounds expensive.
It often prohibitively expensive, like company-killing expensive.
So how does the MVP help navigate that minefield?
It breaks it down. It lets you focus on meeting the core requirements, security, privacy, data handling, for just that initial limited feature set.
Okay, so you're not trying to boil the ocean on day one.
Exactly. You can test those really sensitive workflows encryption who can access what data with a small controlled group of users first, find the weird edge cases, And then, as you add features later, you incrementally expand your compliance efforts, your certifications. You spread that huge cost and effort over time. It makes it achievable.
That discipline, that focus, leads right into the next risk, which feels like the most serious: clinical and patient safety risk.
This is where minimum is actually a feature, not a bug. It's potentially life-saving. The MVP forces you to launch only the essential features that have been properly vetted.
Vetted for clinical value and for safety.
Absolutely, with real input from clinical experts. And critically, it helps you avoid feature bloat,
Right, the temptation to just keep adding more stuff.
which in healthcare isn't just confusing, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
More complexity means more potential points of failure, more ways to disrupt a workflow, more chances for error. Keeping the MVP minimal keeps it focused and, frankly, safer.
Okay, and the last big risk category: market and user adoption. Because we all know healthcare can be, well, resistant to change.
Painfully slow sometimes, yeah. You can build the most brilliant tech solution, but if clinicians won't actually use it, or if it messes up their established routines too much.
It's dead on arrival. Doesn't matter how good it is.
Exactly. And the MVP is kind of the antidote to that skepticism. It forces you to engage with your real end users, doctors, nurses, patients, admin staff, whoever they are, right from the beginning.
Get their fingerprints all over it early.
Constantly. You iterate based on how they actually use it, what problems it actually solves for them in their day, not just what you think they need.
And that builds credibility.
It builds credibility, it builds trust, it creates early advocates. That's gold in an industry that's naturally cautious about new things.
Okay, so we get why the MVP is so critical here. It's about managing finance, compliance, safety, and adoption risks. But let's get practical. How do you actually build one successfully in healthcare? There seems to be a clear process, starting with something fundamental.
Yeah, the absolute first step before you even think about code. Identify and validate the core healthcare problem.
Get out of the building, basically.
Absolutely. Talk to clinicians. Talk to patients. Talk to administrators. Understand their pain points. What's inefficient? What's costly? What's risky right now?
And make sure it's a real problem, not just something you think is a problem.
Exactly. Is it significant? Does it happen often? Does it cost time or money? You need surveys, interviews, maybe workflow analysis. Real research to prove the need before you start building.
That validation seems crucial. Then, once you've nailed the problem, the next steps are about focus, right? Defining the audience and prioritizing features.
Yeah. Steps 2 and 3. First, keep that initial target audience incredibly narrow. Don't try to build something for every doctor and every patient everywhere.
Like maybe just focus on endocrinologists managing diabetes.
Right.
Or hospital discharge planners.
Precisely. A really specific group. And then you prioritize features for that group. The Moscow method is pretty useful here.
Oh, Moscow.
Must have, should have, could have, and won't have. At least won't have for now.
And that won't have list is key for discipline, I imagine.
That's arguably the most important list for healthcare MVP. Let's take telehealth again. A must-have. Secure video calls, basic IPA compliance, non-negotiable. A should-have. Maybe simple scheduling integration. A could-have. Perhaps patient-reported outcome surveys. But a won't-have for that first MVP. Definitely things like a complex AI diagnostic tool or full integration with every single EHR system out there.
Got it. You leave those big, expensive, complex things out initially. Avoid that feature creep.
You have to. That discipline defines the quality and safety of the MVP.
Okay, so you've defined the problem, the audience, the core features. Steps 4 and 5 are build fast and gather feedback.
Right. And build fast here means using tech that allows rapid, secure development. Maybe even low-code tools for the very first iteration, just to get something testable.
Like Bubble or Flutterflow, those kinds of things.
Potentially, yeah, for that initial validation before maybe moving to more robust platforms. The key is speed and security.
Yeah.
Then you pilot it.
With that narrow user group you defined earlier.
Exactly, a tightly controlled pilot. And then you become obsessed with feedback. User interviews, watching how they actually use it, looking at the analytics.
Measuring adoption, finding the friction points.
All of it. And crucially, being totally willing to change things, pivot the features, maybe even tweak the whole business model based on what that real-world data is telling you.
Which leads to the last step. Iterate, expand, and scale responsibly.
Once you've got proof that the core features work, that they deliver value, that your compliance workflows hold up, that you're seeing some positive signs, then you start adding.
Adding those should-have features from your list.
Right. Looking for partnerships.
Right.
Planning those more complex integrations with the big hospital systems, the EHRs like Epics or Cerner, but doing it carefully, responsibly, based on proven success.
That all sounds logical, but let's make it concrete. Can you share some real-world examples where this worked? Like PAC-AQ,
PAC-EQ is a great case. They tackled referral management for post-acute care. Think nursing homes, rehab facilities.
which is notoriously messy, right? Lots of faxes, phone calls.
Exactly. Manual, slow, error-prone. Their MVP wasn't some fancy clinical tool initially. It was a web and mobile platform using AI to automate that administrative bottleneck, fixing the paperwork problem first.
So they identified a very specific, costly pain point.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
And once that core administrative function was working and proving value, then they started adding the complex stuff, integrating with big systems like point-click care, NevHealth.
And the result?
Within about 6 months, they had a much more efficient automated system. Better patient flow, better outcomes, just by solving that initial narrow problem really well. Textbook MVP.
Okay, what about another one, RX Live?
Another good one. They focus on pharmacy services, particularly for value-based care models. Their MVP started really lean.
What were the core features?
Secure communication tools, basically, and some initial AI analytics to help pharmacists identify patients who are maybe at high risk of, missing meds or needing follow-up. Super focused.
And based on feedback from that?
They added crucial integrations with big players like Epic, the EHR system, and SureScripts for prescription data.
Yeah.
And over 18 months, they demonstrated they could actually help reduce hospital readmissions by getting pharmacists more proactively involved.
Wow, so starting small, proving a specific outcome, then integrating.
That's the pattern. You see it with others too, like ZocDoc starting with just basic booking in one city, or Oscar Health focusing on digital-first insurance for a specific demographic initially.
So when you pull back and look at these stories, the benefits really jump out, don't they? It's cost efficiency, sure, faster time to market, getting that early foothold.
Definitely.
But it's also that user-centric iteration building what people actually need, and that builds confidence with users, with investors, with everyone.
It creates a solid foundation. But, it's not magic. Things can still go wrong even with an MVP approach. We should probably touch on the common pitfalls.
Good point. What trips people up? Forgetting the M in MVP.
That's the biggest one. Overbuilding. Trying to cram too much into that first version. Burns cash, adds risk, defeats the whole purpose.
The lure of the shiny new feature.
It's hard to resist. Second big pitfall. Neglecting compliance, even in the MVP. Thinking you can bolt on security or privacy later.
Which is a recipe for disaster in healthcare.
Absolutely catastrophic. A fine, a breach related to that early version, it can kill the company before it even gets going.
Okay, what else?
Ignoring the feedback. You go through the motions of collecting user input, but then you don't actually listen or act on it because you're too attached to your original vision.
So you end up building the wrong thing anyway, despite the process.
Right. And lastly, failing to plan for what comes after the MVP. Not thinking about technical scalability or the roadmap for future certifications. Building an MVP on a shaky foundation that can't handle growth.
Right. It works for 10 users, but falls over with 10,000.
Exactly. You need a plan for scale from early on.
Okay, so pitfalls noted. To wrap things up, let's distill this into some actionable best practices, a sort of checklist for listeners thinking about building a healthcare MVP.
Good idea. Where should they start?
Number one has to be involving stakeholders early and often. End users, clinicians, patients, but also people who understand the regulatory landscape, maybe clinical leaders within an organization, get their buy-in and insights throughout.
Absolutely critical. Second, document everything. Every assumption you tested, every piece of user feedback, every compliance hurdle you cleared, that becomes your institutional knowledge. It speeds everything up later.
Third, think modular architecture right from the start. Build the MVP in a way that makes it easy to add components later, and crucially, to integrate with those big systems like EHRs down the line. Don't paint yourself into a technical corner.
Very important.
Yeah.
And fourth, maybe the most fundamental, integrate privacy and security from day zero. It cannot be an afterthought. Even the simplest MVP feature handling patient data needs to be built to the highest standard required by your users and regulators.
Yeah, that security by design principle feels non-negotiable here.
It has to be. In healthcare, innovation is essential, but it can never, ever come at the expense of safety or trust.
That feels like the core message.
I think so. The MVP methodology, when applied correctly in this sector, it provides that discipline. It lets you be brave with your ideas, but smart with your resources, and build confidence as you grow in a really complex world.
So maybe a final thought for our listeners, given how complex and high stakes this all is.
Maybe consider this. Is the biggest risk in digital health really not starting? Or is it trying to build absolutely everything all at once?
That's provocative. What's that one specific, expensive, painful problem in your clinical world right now? Could you imagine the absolute simplest, safest, most compliant solution just for that one thing?
Focus there first. Validate it. That might just be the starting point for something huge.
Definitely some food for thought. Thanks for this deep dive.
My pleasure. It's a fascinating space.